Hi everyone, I'm Matt Sperling, and welcome to Magic the Gathering for Advanced Players, where I'm going to try to help my viewers incorporate into their toolkit preparation techniques at a high level, thinking about Magic at a high level in terms of strategy, tactics, what are they seeing, not seeing, information they're picking up. Basically a lot of elements of not just high level play, but high level preparation. So studying videos, which today is going to be involved, or studying lines of play, that sort of thing. So welcome to my video series today. I actually got a hold of some of Lawrence Harmon's stream log. You can see his Twitter and Twitch information here, alongside the deck list that he chose to play in this league. We're going to be watching match one of this league and analyzing the lines of play and talking about it. You can see this is a no bad cards 4-color Delver, or NBC 4-color Delver. This is a version with 20 land and no preordain, which Lawrence was tinkering with, and I like this list quite a bit. But this isn't going to be a video about the deck list. It'll be a video about certain lines of play and how to kind of pick up certain edges. It's worth noting here that Lawrence is playing Legacy a lot more than I am. He's certainly playing Delver a lot more than I am. It's very possible he's a better Delver player than me. And yet, if he and I have an exchange, and here we're doing it kind of publicly, but either way, if we have an exchange about lines of play, does that mean that I can't offer him anything because I'm perhaps worse at Delver than he is at this moment in time? I don't think so. I think that even if I say, hey, I would have done this slightly differently, and he were to come back and say, well, here's why I did that, and here's how I think about that, you're going to learn something from those exchanges. And that's really important to you. You may not have access to my coaching. You may not have access to, Gabriel Nassif's coaching or whoever, Reed Duke. That's not always the point. If you can find someone who you can talk to about plays and maybe they're right half the time and you're right half the time, well, the combination of you guys together in your preparation, that's going to lead to a more robust preparation. You're going to start seeing things that you wouldn't have seen alone in isolation. So when Lawrence reaches out to me and says, hey, could you take a look at these videos? That's really what he's looking for, and that's what I'm looking to provide. That dialogue about maybe I'm going to miss something, maybe he's going to miss something, but together we're going to prepare at a high level. So let's dive in and get to that high-level Delver play. We've got, like I mentioned, the Twitch log, or the Twitch archive video here. I guess I could show you the sideboard first. Why not? It's not going to be super relevant, but Hydra Blast, Forced Negation, a couple Plague Engineer, some Thought Seizes. Surgicals, Ancient Grudge, so a bunch of one-ofs. Now, this sideboard looks kind of random, as Legacy sideboards often do with their one-ofs, but this stuff is highly tuned, highly cultivated. I mean, when you have 4 Ponder, 4 Brainstorm, you add a second copy of Tyrant Scorn, you're going to see that card a lot more frequently. You must be thinking about depths and other matchups. You add Surgical Extraction. You add Plague Engineer, even though it's 1 or 2 of Ancient Grudge, these cards are going to show up, so it's certainly relevant which tools you have access to based on the metagame as expected. But again, that's not what this video is about, but I wanted to at least show you that. The deck list we're looking at today, 4-color Delver, no bad cards. So this is going to be round 1 of a league, and it's something that was streamed at the time, and I'm looking at the stream archive.
I'm going to keep this hand, but it's not that great. It just has brainstorms, so...
As usual, I'm going to turn up the desktop mic a little bit. As usual, we're looking at a 1 point... I'm watching in 1.5x. I just find that to be the appropriate pace for my studying. If I'm going to watch at 1.5x and pause, I go over that every video, but I think, again, that's just a tool. I think if that's something you never did before, that right there could really provide a multiplier on how you're using your time efficiently.
We're playing against depths. This is... It's okay. To a degree. Okay, Lotus Petal is fine. Unless they have therapy.
Okay, so Lawrence identifies Dark Depths from the initial line of Peatland, Thoughtseize, Lotus Petal, and then I think it's worth noting here, remember, sequencing matters, or, all this stuff matters. I think the Lotus Petal turn 1, as opposed to holding it, makes it slightly more likely that our opponent has a crop rotation. That's just one of the only cards that would make you want to have the man up. Now, of course, you might just not want your Lotus Petal to get Thought Seized, but you might always play Lotus Petal turn 1. Those are certainly possible. You might not want it to get dazed or whatever. I mean, look, maybe it doesn't mean that much, but I think I would still be moving the needle a little bit every time my opponent has crop rotation turn on, like this turn 1 and game 1 on the play. Every time they have crop rotation, they're going to play Lotus Petal. And if they don't have crop rotation, they're going to play it some of the time. Now, if you're a depths player, you might look at that and say, well, actually, I should probably decide, because of Chalice, I'm going to play my Lotus Petal turn 1 every time. So if that's the case. This is the kind of high-level play. What information am I giving away? If the opponent has a consistent line of always play the Lotus Petal, we actually don't learn a lot about whether they have crop rotation. But because not all players are on that level, we're going to adjust slightly towards, they might have a crop rotation, which is always the case, but you get a little info there. Now, immediately, with this four-color deck with cards like Abrupt Decay and Wrenn and 6, and you got to think about what your land drops carefully. So I like that Lawrence is doing that.
I was planning on leading on a Misty, so I could fetch Brainstorm and then get maybe Badlands and have red and black that way. Leading on Vault punishes me if I draw Abrupt Decay, but I think just playing Bulk is fine here. I guess a Wasteland also kind of punishes me, but I think having the ability to Lightning Bolt is a bit more relevant. What's up, Elizabeth? My opponent going Peatland, Lotus Petal kind of implies that they have a creature of some sort. The only worry is if they have Hex Mage. What is this? Green Sun for 2.
Alright, let's pause the video. So, sack my Lotus Petal, Green Sun for 2. You got to start thinking, what are the 2-drops in the opponent's deck? Now, technically, you can go get a 1-drop, but you're not going to sack your Lotus Petal against a deck that's likely to play Daze. You're not just going to sack your Lotus Petal for fun. So what costs 2? If you pull up some lists, so this is a good time to study. If you don't, now Magic Online affords you a little bit of time. You could even start to look at some deck lists. I recommend doing that. If you're new to a deck, certainly you want to have kind of, my opponent's playing depth, let me go pull up some lists during the downtime. So that's part of my preparation as well. But okay, so let's mimic that here. So here, what I've done is I've gone to MTG Top 8. You go to the search bar. This is an important part of your toolkit here. You go to your search bar and you want to, let's say, look up Dark Depths and Legacy. It's going to come up with a bunch of different stuff. You might even narrow that down by, you might search for the Nurturing Peatland, right? Kind of narrow this down. A bunch of different stuff's going to pop up. Okay, where are we? It's not really the lands version or the Maverick version. I might click on what's this first one? Well, the first thing I click on is, this version has Satyr Wayfinder at 2, and that's the only green creature at 2, but it's not playing the Green Sun Zenith. So let me go back and add Green Sun's Zenith. I think it's a Green Sun's Zenith. Let's see. Okay, Dark Depths, because it's not a Maverick deck. Okay, Green Sun Zenith. So Thoughtseize, Lotus Petal. Okay, so we found a deck that starts to make sense. And the opponent is likely looking to grab a Satyr Wayfinder because the 1-drops, they wouldn't have sacked the Lotus Petal. So we kind of have some information. So now we can either brainstorm to try to daze that or force a will it potentially. Or we can say, well, it's just a Wayfinder. I'll continue to develop. Let's see how Lawrence thinks about it. So first, and then we can talk about it.
So Reclaimer or the 1-drop that gets Shroud are like the obvious cards. I don't particularly want to daze, and they did play a land. This is kind of a spew of a Brainstorm. Do I have a Brainstorm here? They can have Teague. I think I'm just going to let this happen because I think whatever they get, I can Lightning Bolt most likely.
Okay, so Lawrence just didn't identify the Hogak Satyr Wayfinder thing. I cheated, right? I searched and found, but that's fine. So I'm cheating. If you're in a paper tournament, you may not going to have that. So give us the information. I do think, though, that he had enough information to move off the 1-drops and think, okay, could this be some kind of weird Maverick deck with Gaddock Teague? Certainly it could be. In which case, yeah, Lightning Bolting it sounds better than brainstorming. If I happen to know about Hogak depths, then I'd probably brainstorm looking for a Daze, because that sounds a lot better to me than trying to Lightning Bolt the Wayfinder. But he didn't find it, so that's fine. He's going to take a line based on what he knows. Although I think he should instead of saying, well, the 1-drops are most likely, he should have just said, I don't know what's about to come, because it's going to be a 2-drop.
Oh, it's Hogak depths. Okay. Well, I'm probably going to lose this matchup, because this matchup is terrible. I don't particularly want to Lightning Bolt this. Do I want to brainstorm? 2, 3, 4. If I find a Tarmogoyf for a Wrenn and 6, I do want to do that. This is a bit aggressive, but I kind of want to pump out this Gurmag. So this is a start.
Okay, so end of turn, we have a choice: brainstorm or bolt the Seder Wayfinder. If you 1 Wrenn and 6 in the graveyard means there's only 2 left in the library, right? Because that's a big reason to use the brainstorm now. That's a cleaner way of killing Seder Wayfinder, is putting the Wrenn and 6 out. Maybe you can even find a Wasteland at some point, and the Wrenn and 6 is already in play. You're doing great. So that's what I like about brainstorm. It's better if you do it in response. Obviously, there's the Daze, but regardless, that kind of gives you both things. You can both try to find a Wrenn and 6 and try to find a Daze. Here, so once you haven't Dazed, I think I prefer Lightning Bolt. Untap, and then brainstorm. It's pretty close though, and maybe find, even though there's only 2 Wrenn and 6 in the deck, maybe finding one is valuable enough. Not sure, although I would lean brainstorm response if I think of that, or if not, I lean bolt. Get this off the board, and that way the Hogak from the hand is just less likely to emerge, and I save my mana. I get a better brainstorm on the next turn. I get a better brainstorm than I would now, so I'd probably do it that way. It's just a slight tweak on the ordering there.
Oh, I realized I should have Lightning Bolted this, because now they can fetch up like a Dryad Arbor and play a Hogak. That's how they punish me. What's up, guys? I couldn't think of a reason to bolt earlier, but I just did. So if they play Hogak, I could easily die, but we'll see. They have a Dark Depths in hand, I believe. So I'm looking to find a Wasteland. Okay, they play a Wasteland, that's fine. Thoughtseize, that's annoying, but fine. I currently am not going to Atlanta or Syracuse. So now they're disincentivized to Wasteland me, but they're probably more incentivized to Crop Rot. They took the Brainstorm, which makes sense. And they have their Satyr. So this Daze can keep them off of a 2024 turn. And so can this Wasteland.
Okay, we didn't get punished in terms of, cast a creature or find Arbor, cast a Hogak from the hand. I mean, the stuff that makes Bolt a lot better hasn't happened. That's good. Now we draw an interesting card, Wasteland. A couple of lines of play open to us. We have Polluted Delta Angler to kind of maximize on pressure. We can even mix in a Lightning Bolt on the blocker and really hit pretty hard with Daze backup. We have Bolt Attack Wasteland a land, specifically Bayou, and we have Bolt Attack Wasteland Go with Daze up and with Wasteland up. Now, typically, I think if you've played a lot of Delver against Depths, you're used to not wanting to. You don't want to just throw your Wasteland at their non-depths staged lands. It's usually not as effective as keeping a Wasteland out there. It's hard for them to win when you have a Wasteland up. So that's a potential line of play. Let's see what Lawrence does, and then let's discuss the different options.
We'll start there. And we'll play Wasteland, so that buys me an extra turn.
I think all your lines that I found, have Bolt your guy, attack for 6. I think that's just better. And then
so my plan is to attack with Goyf, and then the following turn, Polluted Delta, fetch, play Gurmag, attack with Goyf. I have no events planned for the rest.
Okay, so here, it's Wasteland Go, and so now something like Hexmage Wasteland, your Wasteland. Well, you could daze your way around that. If play depths. So you have having the Wasteland up is certainly valuable because it gives you flexibility. I actually think that this is an area where you actually want to switch off of the basic strategy, or not even basic, but the relatively advanced strategy, save your Wasteland against depths. I think in this spot you actually want to go back to a more kind of just mindless, let me Wasteland your Bayou. The reason being, if you look at how far your opponent is from a depth, stage depths is unlikely to happen unless opponent can chump. The nice thing about having the Bayou out of play is as soon as if that peatland ever gets tapped for mana, the Goyf is now lethal. So plays such as on my following turn, play Seder Wayfinder, see what happens. I mean, that kind of stuff gets pretty pricey because now the Goyf is lethal. Play a black land, cast a Hexmage, and then for next turn, well, now you're going to have to chump with the Hexmage because this peatland's going to take you to 6. So I think the specific combination of what's going on here, I think it makes Wasteland the Bayou better. Also, your Wasteland is less effective at stopping Dark Depths when the opponent has a Wasteland because he can do things like Wasteland your Wasteland, and then when you respond with Wasteland your Dark Depths, there could be crop rotation, there could be sack my Hexmage, whatever. So the daze makes that a little bit less relevant, but it's still super relevant. Opponent goes crop rotation, okay. They may now they can try to go off through Wasteland. I'd be worried about that. Now, if we Wasteland straight away and it gets crop rotated, opponent has to take one to do it. And then if they get depths, they're down to, they have 1 black, so they have to either play black with 2 cards left. They'd have to have Black Source and the Hexmage, or they'd have to have the Thespian Stage. It's not clear. It's not perfect. It's not. That's definitely a risk that they have crop rotation stage. So perhaps that's a reason not to do it. But for me, I think it's actually better to Wasteland here. Although it's pretty close. So at least let's think about it. Not a high confidence play because again you're kind of opening yourself up to one set of lines and shutting off another. But I really like the fact that my opponent's going to have to take the damage to use the peatland, and now my Goyf is lethal. And I also don't like that if I'm planning to just win a couple turns from now, well, this Wasteland's going to keep my Wasteland from being super effective anyways.
See here.
Seder Wayfinder now puts it, again, we have this daze that would cause the damage. I think the damage here, let's see if I can get rid of this.
Does dazing here do anything?
Icon. Interesting spot. I mean, you daze Wayfinder. Now that Wayfinder's going to have to chump. It makes Hogak less likely. You daze the Wayfinder. Now the Gurmag Angler will be lethal if the peatland gets tapped again. So I actually do like dazing the Wayfinder, just forcing, just get rid. First of all, you might, and also the opponent might be off of crop rotation. So it gives you a better, perhaps even a better window to Wasteland, or you can kind of see what they get off Wayfinder. So I like dazing it. I think the daze is unlikely to have a ton of value later, relative to just getting them on Goyf must be blocked. So I would daze here.
Thanks for the follow. Fez. What are the pros of this deck over Rug? Your average card quality is just higher. So in matchups where Rug would normally have to leave in some number of Force of Will, you just get to cut all of your forces and just junk people. It's a matter of preference. I don't think dazing here does anything, unfortunately. So we will let this happen. and see what happens from there. This only gives lands. So they have a Cabal Therapy, which is annoying. And they have a Thespian Stage and a Depths. So there's the stage. And they can't... Oh, Dazing did do something there. Dazing cuts them off of a thing. Dazing would have made a Wrenn and 6 lethal. But this is fine. Zach Allen's deck seemed appealing to me. So I think upkeep, I'm going to Wasteland the Thespian Stage because I have a Force of Will. I'm going to get Underground. I should have gotten Badlands, actually. For whatever reason, if they decide to Wasteland my thing. Sorcery Land artifact. So not Planeswalker. Or instant. Thanks for the follow, Tannen. What's up, Random? So they can make a 20/20 here, so I'm going to... Do I want to... No, they can play around the thing fairly trivially. So I'm going to upkeep Wasteland there at Thespian Stage to force action. And this puts them in a position where they have to have, let's see, Crop Rot 1. They have to double Crop Rot plus an Urboard. Something like that. Okay, that just happened, so. What's up, Zach? So if they go Urborg...
Yeah, so it's just a sharp play. I mean, if the opponent has Depths in hand off of the first Wayfinder, plays Depths, Wasteland's our Wasteland. Whatever we do with that Wasteland in response, a 20/20 might emerge. So smart to upkeep, hit the Thespian Stage, and then protect yourself that way with Force of Will.
They need a free Counterspell as well. Where I got some Lotus Petal. So there's the Dark Depths. There's the Hex Mage. That's not resolving.
Okay, so Force of Will, Hex Mage win the game. Interestingly, had we dazed the Wayfinder, we wouldn't have had to even draw Force of Will because the daze would have put the opponent to 6. This playing of Hex Mage would have put them to 5, and we have 2 5-power creatures against a Merit Lage. So, the way things played out, it didn't matter, but it's interesting to note that 1 damage becomes pretty relevant in a way that you kind of have to see a couple turns ahead. Me watching a video replay, have an advantage there. So, again, it's not saying Lawrence should have spotted it, but let's talk about let's study and talk about what are the upsides of dazing. Well, the upsides of dazing, taking your opponent off crop rotation and putting them down a life. The life is actually pretty relevant here with a 6/7 Goyf and about to play a second 5-power threat. So the way things shook out, Lawrence's line is a winning line. I certainly like most of what he did there. Just wanted to provide a few notes. And the play about, do I Wasteland the Bayou and risk the crop rotation depths? Do I just wait with the Wasteland? Actually the way he played it ended up working out pretty nicely. So I'm now slightly lower confidence that was the right play. My line of getting rid of that Bayou if the opponent doesn't have crop rotation. So he kind of got to play around crop rotation for most of the game. And I like the way he played it overall. Let's see how the sideboard goes.
Also, that line that I just did got opened up by me drawing Force of Will. I think I would have died otherwise. So Hogak Depths is a bit weird. I think I went Plague Engineer for Zombie. I obviously want this to answer Depths. Thoughtseize gets a little worse, but Surgical looks more appealing, and Sylvan Libraries maybe. Decay's pretty bad. I don't actually think Pierce and Snare are that great. It's been a while since I've looked at one of these lists, though. I want this. True Name's also a bit slow. I think I'll do this to start with.
Okay, so let's back up a second here. So he's looking to sideboard out 2 Abrupt Decay, 2 Pierce, 1 Snare, 1 True Name.
A bit slow.
Let's wait till he gets the right stack going. Okay, so Spell Snare is actually seems like it has enough targets with Hex Mage and Satyr Wayfinder both being fairly important cards that our opponent's unlikely to sideboard out. I mean, not that Hex Mage couldn't be sided out against our 9-6 deck, but it seems like Spell Snare is likely to have enough targets. Let's talk about True Name Nemesis and cards like Gurmag Angler. I think against any deck that's not really interested in killing your threats. Now, if we look at a deck list like this, you can't see the sideboard, but if I pop it out and show you the sideboard, the abrupt decays coming in mean that your opponent's likely to actually spend some of the games killing your threats. So I'm probably fine in that context to leave in both anglers. I think True Name Nemesis, though, is just too poor against a deck that you're mostly trying to interact with. You are trying to present a fast clock, not a resilient clock. Yes, it can't be Abrupt Decay, but the opponent has 3 Abrupt Decay, not 10 removal. So I think I'd look to take out both True Name Nemesis and then leave in either Spell Snare or Sylvan Library. I'm not sure how good Thoughtseize is. I'm just honestly not sure against this configuration of Hogak Depths. That yes, some of their annoying cards like Hogak aren't very. Thoughtseize is not good against it at all. Other cards like the important lands, the Dark Depths, Destiny Stage can't be hit. On the other hand, it sure is nice to be able to take a crop rotation and see there isn't a second one. It's certainly nice to kind of know what you're up against and to strip away some of the combo pieces that happen to be spells. I think on the draw it's probably poor because cards like Elvish Reclaimer, it's hard. You kind of want to interact in a different way than the hand destruction. So I'm okay leaving the sideboard with low confidence. I'm not sure whether that's good. Sylvan Library does seem pretty good though. Sylvan Library, kind of a hybrid threat reactive. It's a threat in the sense that you play this card, all of a sudden your foot's on the gas pedal. You're going to win this game over the next couple of turns. You'll be drawing 3 cards a turn, and you're going to run away with it. On the other hand, it's finding you interaction. The first draw step you take with it, rather, it's getting you 2 cards deeper to more interaction. So it's not just a threat like a True Name Nemesis or a Gurmag Angler. So I'd probably like the Sylvan Library. I could even see going down to 1 Gurmag Angler, and just saying, okay, well, Delver, Goyf, these cards, Sylvan Library, Plague Engineer. Plague Engineer not a great threat, but Delver and Goyf, I'll just use my ponders and find one. I would probably leave 2 Gurmag Angler, take out both True Name Nemesis, put in Sylvan Library. So that's probably what I would do.
I think I'll do this to start with. I also added a 20th link.
And we're on the draw for game 2. I actually like shaving a land quite a bit on the draw when my deck has been constructed in a way that's kind of like half a land heavy. It's, the Delver decks could either play 19 land or 20 land. They could play 19 land and preordain. It's kind of like I'm basically like half a land heavy. So I don't mind siding out a land here at all. My opponent does have Wasteland, but usually is not going to use Wasteland that way. So maybe the answer is actually you play Snare and Sylvan and cut a land on the draw, and on the play you probably want the 20th land, and you may even want Thoughtseize or 2 since those are more robust on the play. Maybe not. Again, I'm not sure about Thoughtseize.
Land can go down to,
but I suspect it's not great.
Is Sylvan Library better than a land? I don't know. We'll just try this. Yeah, True Name's slow. You kind of want your threats to come down before turn 3. And you kind of want to just have access to wastelands before them, so there's a chance I win Thoughtseize or some of these other cards, but it's been a while since I played this matchup, so I'm just going to build my deck to kind of curve out on threats.
The deck plays a couple Pithing Needle against the Wasteland, so I mean Ancient Grudge is certainly not 0 value either. If you look at the sideboards, it's possible, and Abrupt Decay. Maybe the fact that now hits Reclaimer or Pithing Needle. Maybe Abrupt Decay is now a tool that you want in a matchup like this. So certainly something else to think about.
Delver decks, and I kind of want to have a 20th land, Misty being the next best fetch. And then I wanted to try a Spell Snare just because I need to keep the blue card count a bit reasonable when I'm cutting a blue card and its interaction for the combo decks. Yeah, exactly, Tannen. The other thing is fetching black early isn't stellar in these matchups, especially ones where I want to leverage Ren 6. So I kind of just want my interaction to be free for the most part, and I just kind of want to curve out. Thoughtseize kind of goes dead a bit awkwardly. So I don't know. We'll see. I could get punished one way or another. Like, in this matchup, I'm mostly just looking to play, like, an early Delver Secrets and go from there.
I like that analysis about Thoughtseize. It goes dead pretty quickly. It's also forced you to commit mana in the early game as opposed to threats. I mean, that all sounds right.
I kind of hate this hand, but I have to keep it. The reason I hate it is because a early Thoughtseize is really brutal here. I may actually force a Will of Thoughtseize because I need to be able to ponder into a threat. Like, I want to find a Delver as fast as possible. The Wasteland is obviously good, but, you know, we'll see how things pan out.
I agree with Lawrence. If you get Thoughtseize with this hand, you have no threat. And letting Thoughtseize resolves gives your opponent optionality between Force of Will and Ponder. Using the Force of Will takes away that optionality at the cost of a daze. Now you're guaranteed to be able to ponder. You have Wasteland, which is one of your most valuable cards, but with no pressure, it's not going to be enough. So if I got Thoughtseize, I think Force of Will is probably right. So I agree with Lawrence on that. Don't think he actually gets Thoughtseize if memory serves, but
Thanks for the follow, Becky.
We're always worth thinking about.
So my opponent doing that is interesting. Plague Engineer. That's fine. I'm going to get Tropical Island here because I can get Badlands with my second land and have all of my colors. But like I said, I still just want to find Delver, a second Force, a Ponder, and a Surgical. I don't think any of these cards are bad enough to shuffle.
Okay, so my coaching here, and let's see if we can rewind really quickly to see the Ponder window. So Lawrence, his reasoning, none of these cards are bad enough to want to shuffle away. I think that's... I would try to coach him out of that mindset and coach him more towards... Our mindset here should actually be less about, well, getting value to this Ponder or whatever, more about we need to find a threat. Plague Engineer at 2 power for 3 mana is just not... I don't count that as a... I mean, it's a threat in one sense, but I wouldn't count that. We want to find one of our Anglers, Tarmogoyfs, or Delvers. I think we can keep these 3 cards because there's a Ponder, but if that Ponder was, I don't know, Wasteland, and we had Force of Will, Wasteland, Surgical Extraction, 3 good cards in the matchup, and say, well, none of these cards are bad enough to shuffle away, I think that would be a mistake. I think we probably would want to shuffle to find a threat because just playing draw go is just not going to be super effective against a resource light, mulligan to 6 on the play Lotus Petal, resource light opponent on the play. The hands that don't have threats are actually your most vulnerable hands when the opponent is resource light. They're vulnerable in a different way, not to the fast, super quick kill, but just to the grind you out and play a top deck war. Even though I started with only 6 cards and one of them being Lotus Petal, now I get to grind you out because you didn't find a threat. So I think you can keep this 3, but the mindset has to be I need to try to find a threat here. And so because it has Ponder, I can keep it. Now the second decision, what do I want to stick in my hand off this Ponder? Surgical Extraction, so I'm kind of ready for any kind of like Hagak nonsense. The Verdant Catacombs could easily get a Dryad Arbor end step. Then Satyr Wayfinder could be your next play off a land, and now it looks like Hagak might emerge. Surgical Extraction somewhat sort of prevents it if it mills the Hagak, but not if the hand... And it's not clear to me. Do I ever need to force a will twice? So you gotta kind of look at this. What are the odds of that Hagak scenario unfolding in a way where surgical is first of all, I could just force a will to Satyr Wayfinder, and that sounds fine to me. So I'd probably put force a will in my hand, but you got to think about that too. Yeah, I'm not gonna keep it. You only get to put one of either second force of will or surgical in your hand, and the second one may get pondered away or not show up till later. Probably make it second force of will.
Bad enough to shuffle.
Lawrence agrees.
So we'll see how this pans out. My opponent mulled a 6 and then just played 2 cards out and then didn't do anything. And I'm not sure what that means. The other question is, am I supposed to force of will a Satyr Wayfinder? I don't think so.
All right. Are we supposed to force... So, Thespian Stage, Satyr Wayfinder. I think you do want to force of will Satyr Wayfinder. I think that, again, we have a resource light opponent. Satyr Wayfinder now puts and the land drop puts the opponent at 3 cards in hand. We have 2 Force of Wills, a Wasteland, a Plague Engineer. So we have some cards that trade on a 2-for-1 or 1-for-1 basis. The opponent's resource light. Satyr Wayfinder represents both It's a big part of the piece of the puzzle for the card Hagak. And it's also going to likely get a land, which is another big resource. It's actually one of the resources that Force of Will doesn't interact with, so you can't Force of Will the Depths, but you can Force of Will the Wayfinder that finds it some of the time. And on balance, I just think that's it's keeping your opponent resource light by forcing this. And now it actually diminishes our resource advantage in the sense that you get rid of 2 cards to do it. But look, I'm looking at these 2 Force of Wills as kind of, okay, I'm going to get 2-for-1 here. But the Satyr Wayfinder is going to provide my opponent with a 2-for-1. It's not really about that. It's just about the fact that it's likely to get my opponent a very important land resource that I may or may not be able to interact with. It makes my dazes less effective on the margin because my opponent has more lands. Whereas if I just Force of Will pitching a daze, maybe this other daze actually will snag something in a subsequent turn. So I think there's enough value being provided to a resource light opponent that I would just Force of Will it.
It could make like if they have therapy, they're gonna know at this point, which is awkward. But...
Oh yeah, and Lawrence makes a great point. I mean, Cabal Therapy is actually really strong against this hand. It's a card you have to Force of Will. And so if my opponent gets a land and a therapy, it's a nightmare. Or if my opponent has a therapy and can fire that off and get it dazed or Force of Willed, I mean, that is a big piece of the puzzle here. This depth deck plays up to 4 therapy in this online list. So I think you add that into the mix. Even if it was close before, that makes it a pretty clear Force of Will.
This does feed into my... Okay, that's good to know about. It does feed into my... Oh, they put Sajiri Step into their hand? They don't have a way to buy that back, do they? I think I'm going to ponder again.
Okay, and first of all, we got opponent makes a choice. It reveals information about where their bottleneck is. They're just very unlikely to be bottlenecked at black mana if they're taking Sajiri Step over Urborg. They're also fairly likely to have another Urborg in hand because that play just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Sajiri Step, not a very good card to have in your hand. It's one of the tutor targets for crop rotation. So it's okay to have in your hand. I mean, it can get you through cards like Delver or Strix. But if my opponent was bottlenecked on black mana, just didn't have a way to produce black mana, they fetched a forest. They fetched a forest instead of a Bayou, and they've now passed on Urborg in favor of Sajiri Step. Indicates the opponent's not bottlenecked on black mana. It's potentially relevant.
Is perfect. I'm going to draw this surgical, play my Wasteland and pass here.
All right, so Ponder finds a threat.
Yeah, like usually the really adept players won't expose their their depths to surgical. And I think my opponent playing up...
So I want to rewind real quick. Again, we're watching videos on demand. This paused rewind, really important part of the toolkit. Here, surgical, we're going to see Ponder, Wasteland now with Surgical. And there's a decision to be made here, actually, because you have Wasteland, Thespian Stage, and if your opponent sacks a Lotus Petal and uses Crop Rotation, you're going to get a Lotus Petal and a Crop Rotation at the price of a daze, which is pretty attractive. So you're both getting a Thespian Stage and a mana off the battlefield when you have dazes. You're getting a Thespian Stage in the yard. You could even Surgical it if you wanted. And you're also inducing a play, Lotus Petal, sack it, Crop Rotation. Now you have 7 cards in your hand, so opponent might not even be in the market for using Crop Rotation. So we have to think first about, there's a lot going on. I mean, you're inducing a potentially backbreaking play. That's nice. Even if it's not that likely, it's nice. Wasteland on Thespian Stage is going to choke a mana. But we lose our Wasteland. So now it does kind of open us up to some Dark Depths plays. But all the Dark Depths plays that are really scary involve Thespian Stage that get around Force of Will. So, Wastelanding Thespian Stage and Surgical extracting it doesn't sound all that bad. we know opponent has 4 cards. One of them is Sajiri Step. Well, if we get rid of all the Thespian stages in the deck, the opponent's going to have to kill us with Dark Depth and some spell. And we have 2 Force of Will 2 days, and we're about to play a Tarmogoyf to get the clock going. So I think if you add all that up, I think your odds now. Hogak could still be something that happens, but we kind of, the way we've played so far, Hogak, I don't know what we're going to do. If that happens, we're going to have to either counter the second creature, hope it's not Fetch Land Dryad Arbor, in which case, okay, a counterspells interact. Plague Engineer may want to come down to shut that off within the next couple turns. But I think we can do a lot of work against the Depths plan by just wastelanding here, trying to induce a crop rotation. Even if we don't, we get to surgical it. And I kind of like the way that plays with 2 Force of Wills.
Pass here. Yeah, usually the really adept players won't expose their depths to surgical. And I think my opponent playing out this Lotus Petal is a huge tell that they have a crop rotation. But that's fine. I don't really need to do anything here. There is a bit of a question as to I don't know if I'm leveling myself here. So what I'm thinking about here is I can fetch Badlands here and have mana for this Plague Engineer guaranteed if I draw any land. It does open my opponent up to going this turn Thespian stage, copy my Badlands, but I don't think that's as relevant because I don't think my opponent wants to actually play into my Wasteland. But the question is if they do I Wasteland Surgical? That puts them on exactly Hexmage, and they don't have a black source. I don't know why they took Sajiri Step over their board. I think I'm just going to get the Badlands, play my Goyf, and then see what happens.
Yeah, a couple turns earlier, I noted that, and Lawrence notices the same thing, Urborg was passed on, so black probably not a super big ball neck. I mean, he's very wise to be thinking about, if I go get a black source, my opponent can Thespian stage it, and now has mana for something like Hexmage. But I just think, if you look at the game state as Lawrence did, and as I did earlier with the Urborg pass, it's just black mana is likely not what this game's about. And it's better to actually bring our Plague Engineer online to potentially shut off Hogak the following turn. I actually think that's pretty relevant.
It's part of the cost, Becky. I guess they could clone my Wasteland. If I clone my Wasteland, then I'm going to waste Surgical there, Thespian stage. And I think I would maybe draw Step Surgical to try and induce a crop rot on their turn. Because I think I'm fine Force of Willing, because I have double force, double days, and I kind of want to get these cards a bit out of my hand because a random therapy becomes really awkward. What is this?
So this is really interesting. Opponent now floats a white mana of Krakus, sacks it to crop rotation. I mean, they're not threatening the depths right this second because we have Wasteland, but if we let the crop rotation resolve, then the opponent would simply need to draw, play Wasteland, and then they would have a 20/20. So we can't really let that happen, but we can either Force of Will the crop rotation, in which case, it's just a clean 2-for-2 against a resource light opponent. We know one of those 3 cards is Sajiri Step, so basically a 2-card hand. We could daze it, in which case now if the opponent gets depths, we can go Wasteland Surgical and take them off depths forever. But if we let it resolve, they don't have to get depths. The opponent will understand that that's one of the dynamics. If we daze it, it's like, well, why are we dazing it? They could just get something different. So it's interesting, but again, it's kind of inducing a play that maybe is not the most likely play. The opponent gets depths and gets wrecked, but they do get wrecked if they get it. So that's interesting. But I think if we daze it, they pay with the white, and then they can go get something like a Wasteland. Then they untap, play depths, and then that's a 20/20 that I'm not really interested in. So I think it's scary. I think we just want a Force of Will pitching days and leave ourselves with a Force of Will days. And I think that things are going to go pretty well for us after that. We have the Wasteland, the Surgical. We have the other Force of Will, the Plague Engineer. I think we just want to play a little bit safe and just Force of Will, even though Daze is kind of an interesting fancy play that sometimes lets you Wasteland a Dark Depths. I think the opponent's not all that likely to get Dark Depths just because if you Daze, because they just be at risk of either getting their mana blown up or getting the Surgical, then it just doesn't seem that likely, even though it would wreck them. Oh, lastly, last point. Dazing takes us off of Plague Engineer the following turn because it returns this island to our hand. I don't like that. It also takes us off the other days. You know, if we Force of Will, we still have this days as the opponent taps out for Green Sundew or something. I actually like having the mana. If we draw a third land, instead of that being a dead card, it lets us put an Engineer out, and then now Hagak is no longer a viable part of the opponent's game plan, or not in the same way. And chump blocking becomes worse and harder, obviously.
So if I want to, I can Daze this. And then they can't get Dark Depths because then I can Wasteland Surgical. It's a bit of a greedy play as opposed to Force of Willing it, but I think I'm okay with that. The reason that like if they get Depths here, I could pass their turn and I can't Wasteland, and they could like play a Wasteland or play land and Crop Rot maybe. But I think this is okay. This may be a greedy line. We'll see if I get punished. I think here, taking them off of one of their potential lines is probably beneficial. I think they may just get airboard here. Which I'm not sure. Is getting airboard beneficial for me or no? The other question is, do I want to Wasteland this Thespian stage and Surgical it? Okay, so they're getting a second Thespian stage. That's annoying, but fine for now. It could be a problem going forward, though. Okay, so they are copying my Wasteland, I assume. Oh, they're just straight up copying Forest. Maybe I should have just taken my 2-for-2 and Force of Build. I think they're supposed to copy Wasteland.
Okay, so opponent, makes the better play and gets a Thespian Sage. Again, gets anything other than Dark Depths. In this case, Thespian Sage is pretty annoying. It makes our plan of Wasteland Surgical worse because now we're using 2 resources to try, and there's a second Thespian Sage on the battlefield. Opponent chooses to sack a Lotus Petal to copy Forest, so we've got to think about what that means. It doesn't seem like a super strong play unless the opponent has something like double crop rotation, safekeeper rotation. I'm not sure what the second Forest here opening opponent maybe is trying to induce Wasteland. Opponent, it could be as simple as opponent has Lotus Petal Dark Depths. I don't know. It's a little bit tough to read. It doesn't seem like a great play a high percentage of the time, but the opponent did get a second stage, which is really good. But sacking Lotus Petal to convert it into a Forest, I'm not sure about that. Now that the opponent's tapped out, is it worth sacking sacking our Wasteland, surgicaling it, or sacking it not surgicaling? I don't know. It kind of just feels better to have a Wasteland out. Surgical is not high value yet with 2 Thespian Stages in play, so I think I'd rather just have the Wasteland out, but it's developing kind of interestingly. It's nice to be able to Wasteland when the opponent doesn't have crop rotation up, but with Force of Will, not as relevant. So probably wait. The problem is that 2 stages were likely to play a fairly long game with the opponent 19 life with a chump blocker, so you got to start thinking long term.
Which is interesting. I think this is fine. No, they finally found an airboard. They may take Swamp with the way they've been playing. They have
Yeah, I mean, the second Wayfinder tapping down, leaving up this instead of a green, which is weird, but maybe he's trying to induce us to blow our Wasteland. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, is it okay if that second Wayfinder comes down? I mean, doesn't that represent Hagak in the hand or Hagak in the mill? And then all of a sudden, are we going to counter, a Hagak that can be recast? So I'm not as convinced that this is something that we can let resolve. It's close. and I would pitch Daze if I forced, and then, again, it's a little bit dicey, but our plan here, one nice thing about Wayfinder, does give us more targets for extraction, but it's unlikely the opponent's going to leave depths exposed. So yeah, I don't know. This one's interesting. Something like Force of Will this, Wasteland a stage, the untapped stage, and Surgical. I mean, it's okay, but now we're kind of shields down. So there's some logic to either play. This is a low confidence one, but I actually would lean Force of Willing it. I think I'm a little bit more afraid of Hagak than Lawrence is.
Jerry step. Okay, so they took the airport. And they played it, so they stepped. I don't think I want to Surgical anything just yet. Delver of Secrets is a good draw. I'm still wondering if not just Force of Willing is going to cost me the game, and I think it may actually. Because right now they still just have a bunch of time. I think if they were to lower life total, that Daze line would have been better, but I think here I probably should have just force pitch Daze and called it a day. Oh, they kept step in hand so that they could make a 20/20 and then like play it and attack it.
Alright, so Toxic Deluge, paying enough life to kill the Goyf. A pretty clear Force of Will. If we go down to 0 threats against double stage, it's just, I think our chances of winning go down substantially versus just Force of Will. Leave us a Force of Will with no blue card and then just hope this Delver flips. I think that just sounds better to me than letting a Deluge resolve. Opponent's now gone to pay the life as part of the cost, pretty low. So I think this is a clear Force of Will. Yeah, and Lawrence agrees. You definitely want to keep the second Force of Will. It just has more value than Daze, even though you don't have a blue card
we'll
yet.
See what happens. Force of Will is just a higher value card in this position than Daze. And I think that if I draw a blue card, I would much rather just have access to a Force. But we're getting to the point of the game where Force of Will isn't as relevant. So what I really want to draw here is just like Ren and 6 exactly. A second Delver is interesting. So one thing there is I could have Surgical Extraction myself to shuffle away the Delver, but it being a blue card is good enough. The question here is, so they still can't Wasteland me and present to 20/20. They can, however, go Hexmage plus Depths. But I don't think they have the Depths yet. Am I supposed to play around exactly Hexmage plus Depths? Okay, so they're trading. I think that's good for me.
This is a good attack with Delver. In general, abstract theory out of the game, trading your Delver for their State Wayfinder doesn't sound like a great idea. In the context of the game, the opponent that's a valuable chump blocker, and they're taking 5 from the Goyf to do it, 5 or 6. I think 5, with no Ren yet. And I just think that's a good trade, and now the opponent's at 8, and we can choose then to either play Delver and potentially present a lethal threat, or we can just say go with Force of Will up and Wasteland up and kind of play it from there. So I think a smart attack with Delver.
So 5.
Now the next big decision though, what's more valuable, having Force of Will up or having the Delver out to potentially present lethal? Really tough spot. Delver is going to give you, with this list, Delver is going to give you an extra turn off your clock, meaning it's going to give you lethal next turn. Something like an extra 40% of the time. There are going to be some spots where the opponent has a chump blocker, so it's nice to have out, but it's not lethal. If the top card of your deck is Lightning Bolt, of which there's 4, then it doesn't matter. You sort of have lethal anyways. So it's not quite 50%. There's only 28 spells in the deck. But I think, on balance, that Force of Will looks really valuable in this game state. We're pretty confident our opponent doesn't have Dark Depths. They would have just played differently and copied Wasteland and gone for it. So, we're not protected against the Delver's better against the top deck Dark Depths. Although I think we're in a relatively similar spot. I mean, yeah, if we play the Delver, they draw Dark Depths, then the turn it shaves out the clock will help us, will prevent them from using Testing Stage. So yeah, if they specifically draw Dark Depths, we'll be better off. But if they draw anything that, like a Crop Rotation to get the Depths, or a Seder Wayfinder, or just one of the many other cards, then we're going to probably wish that we had access to Force of Will. So I think in this spot, I'm inclined to just keep the Force of Will up, but really close, really tough spot.
I'm going to play the Delver, because if it flips, I have Lethal next turn. The next question... Oh, fuck. I shouldn't have passed there. I should have considered Surgical and Crop Rotation on my turn. But I think now I'm just locked into doing nothing. Have a good one, Teddy. Okay, so they played Verdant. So they need...
So Lawrence also mentioned the Surgical Extraction, which I forgot to talk about. Yeah, there's, maybe if you're going to go shields down with Force of Will, you actually want to get Crop Rotations out of the deck. I kind of like that idea. But one thing to notice, if that's your line, it's really important that you do that first and then look at the opponent's hand and then decide whether to play Delver. That's actually really valuable. Once you say, okay, part of my Delver shields down strategy is Surgical and Crop Rotation, or even if you don't, you ought to think about Surgical giving you access to what your opponent has in hand. If I Surgical, my opponent has nothing that's worth Force of Willing, I'm much more likely to want to go Delver, maybe one turn clock you, versus if I was to Surgical and see a card like Seder Wayfinder that seems pretty scary, maybe in that, because it both, it just potentially can get a land, and then, I don't have a counter up anymore. Maybe in that spot, I'm actually more interested in countering the Seder Wayfinder than I am in playing the Delver. So I think that Surgical Crop Rotation is probably right, and because it's right, do it first. Get more information about the opponent's hand, and then reassess. So there was a line that Lawrence didn't think of that I think is really important. Surgical gives you information about your opponent's hand. There's also a point earlier in the game where there's a complicated stack involving a daze. In some of those spots, you don't want to just blow a card for information only, but in some of those spots with a complicated stack, and you've got counters, do I save my counter, do I use it? You don't be afraid to Surgical a relevant card, or even in a rare exception, an irrelevant card, to get access to your opponent's hand to make a perfect decision with your counter spells. So I think the Surgical, probably there should have been a window at some point in this game, given how low value it is right here, a window at some point in the game to get access to what the opponent was holding and play perfectly from there.
Either double Crop Rotation and Abrupt Decay. No. Is Tarmogoyf good? If they kill Tarmogoyf. I kind of want to Surgical myself to shuffle, but if I find a blue card, then, I'm not necessarily doing anything with it, and Tarmogoyf maybe presents lethal. So I'm just going to attack here and see what they do.
So Lawrence talked you through a decision there. Surgical could shuffle the deck, get rid of the Tarmogoyf that sat on top of it, maybe find a blue card, maybe find a Lightning Bolt. Is that on balance more valuable than Tarmogoyf and Surgical Extraction? I'm inclined to think so. I think I would have Surgical. I think a random card is actually pretty valuable here. Even a land gives you Plague Engineer, which makes Hogak less likely and makes chump blocking less likely by naming, whatever Dryad Arbor's other creature type is, Dryad or something, by naming Dryad. So I think Tarmogoyf is actually not great here, and I would have Surgical to get rid of it given the low value of Surgical. But it's this way is better against Abrupt Decay, but not much else.
Okay, it's Abrupt Decay. That's what I thought they had, which is part of why I drew this.
Okay, opponent does have Abrupt Decay, so this Goyf's going to look fine, but I think it's on balance, it's not
play around another decay,
not as good.
Do I want to Surgical Crop Rotation? I don't think so. If I didn't board in this Crop Rotation, what would it be? Thoughtseize, Spell Piercer, True Name or something. Maybe a Sylvan Library. Nothing. Probably Sylvan Library.
Opponent not using stage to copy Wasteland's a little bit weird here. It's probably just opponent playing poorly and not something to read into. But yeah, I think the opponent could have put themselves in a better spot by copying Wasteland. Just kind of, I think that's kind of level 1 depth, but I'm not seeing it.
Was the card I would have been inclined to board in this spot? I guess Spell Snare is good in this matchup. I was thinking about Satyr Wayfinder, but I wasn't thinking about Hexmage. Pithing Needle. That is obnoxious. I could have searched Pithing Needle, and that's like a Galaxy Brain play, but okay. I don't think I want to Wasteland. I'd rather just have my mana to cast a Plague Engineer. Yeah. I could have still made it 2020. So I got actively punished for holding Delver exactly that turn.
Alright, well now things are interesting. Pithing Needle that we can't counter. Name Wasteland. Dark Merit Lage that we can't Wasteland thanks to Pithing Needle. So now we're facing down a 2020 and this we're pretty much going to need to flip Delver.
But I have outs of this. So what I'm going to do here is the 2 damage doesn't matter, so I'm not going to EOT the Surgical. So I flipped over, that's good. I'm going to draw this card because that's good. And then I'm going to Surgical Extraction Abrupt Decay. Because I have a threat that's, like, I can put lethal on the table. And they don't have a second Sajiri step, presumably. So this puts me in a position where we'll take these out of the deck because why not? So I can name Zombie, Vampire. I'm gonna name Plant. Forest Dryad.
So Culinary Garden makes a plant. Dryad Arbor is a Dryad. Which one is better to name, or is it all the same? Because there's two. Well, it turns out that fetch lands, Verdant Catacombs, there might even be one in play. Because it can grab Arbor, there's just more Dryad Arbors in the deck, so you just gotta name the one that Dryad Arbor is, the Dryad.
So I don't want to name one of the things that I can force of will. So I'm looking at Dryad Arbor and Colony Garden, and the odds are exactly the same. Like, they have 1 copy of each, and then they have... Actually, no, they have more copies of Dryad Arbor, but I can force of will a Green Sun Zenith. So that doesn't factor into my math, really. So they have Dryad Arbor. Do they not have any more fetches? They have a Verdant Catacombs on the table. So I'm going to name Dryad. So this way they don't have a removal spell. They don't have a Sajiri step. They can't fetch and get Dryad Arbor to survive a turn. And they have 1 draw step to draw exactly Colony Garden.
Well, they're going to have more than 1 draw step potentially because we can't attack in, but yeah. They won't be able to attack this turn unless they draw something like Colony Garden.
Pithing Needle. That doesn't do anything. How is Dryad Arbor not a plant? I agree. Thanks for the follow, Goblin Lackey. They name Jace the Mind Sculptor. That's a reasonable name. Let's see. They block here, and they don't die. No, they aren't dead yet. So I guess they actually have 1 more.
All right, so Ren and 6 is actually a kind of lethal draw step. It's more likely than Jace off that Needle, so the opponent should have named Needle. Worth noting, should have named Ren and 6 because there's obviously more Ren and 6 than likely Jace's, and Ren and 6 is actually a subtle lethal here because you go ping 1. Now next turn you can ping down a 5, attack with everything, and so now you kind of break the stalemate that we were previously in. So Pithing Needle hits Ren and 6, we're still in a stalemate, or because it wouldn't get forced anyways. And then when Ren and 6 gets drawn, it'd be dead. As it played out, Ren and 6 is going to be able to ping you, counter every draw, ping you again, lethal. So Lawrence is going to win this match, win this game. I think even though Lawrence took good lines, won the match, even in a bad matchup, this is a good one to talk about. I enjoyed talking through it because there were some lines of play where we can kind of try to hone in on an advanced strategy with a complex deck like Delver in a complex matchup. talk about different decision points. And I think we can add some things to our toolkit, like using surgical to gain value or dazing to get damage in against those peatland type of lands. That's the type of stuff that's pretty thin. And you don't want to level yourself and go crazy, but we didn't. We just started talking. We talked about, okay, I'm not that confident. I can see this one go either way. Oh, this other play, that would have been better. But this line's dominated by that line. Like, for example, Delver Go was dominated by basically dominated by Surgical You, Get Information, Delver Go, Surgical Crop Rotation specifically. So I think we're picking up a few things there. Hopefully you enjoyed this coaching type of Magic the Gathering for Advanced Players session. If you did, please like and subscribe. I appreciate it. Trying to get this channel up and running. Share it with some friends if you found it helpful. Thanks again.